Hey there, this is Lily from Je t'aime neither. Welcome to Montmartre and to our latest in our series of participatory short stories called There's Only One Paris. So these are short stories which have been created based on your favorite places in Paris. And we've already covered the Eiffel Tower, the Musée d'Orsay, Notre Dame, and the Palais Royal and the Galerie Vivienne. Today we are taking you to a different sort of neighborhood in Paris. We are taking you up to the northeast of Paris to the neighborhood of Belleville. And I'm going to tell you a little more about it in our story. The story is based on some ideas presented by Evelyn, and I would also like to thank Jeremy for inspiring some of the incidences which occur in this story. So we have a little bit of a love story today, a little bit of romance to change things up a little bit. And our story is called Folies de Belleville. So here we go. That must be her, he concluded, peeking over the heads of the crowded terrace and in through the bar's vast front window. Come on, Pierre, you can do this. Despite his pep talk, Pierre took a few steps backwards in order to escape her potential field of view. He fumbled through his pockets in search of his puffer. Once retrieved, he brought it shakily to his lips, tilted his head back, and inhaled deeply. His face glowed in the red light from the large neon sign advertising the bar's name, Eau Folies. She's even prettier in person, he affirmed, leaning over to the right just enough so he could catch another glimpse of Kim. But she's never going to like me. There was really no need for Pierre's nervousness. He felt he resembled his photos closely enough. Okay, some of them might have been a few years old, and he'd put on a little weight since the beginning of the year. But hadn't everyone? He'd met Kim on a dating app back in early March. They'd hit it off straight away through their initial chatting and had made a date to meet up. But then the lockdown was announced, putting their first date on hold and on hold and on hold again with every extension of the quarantine. Even when it was finally lifted due to his asthma, Pierre took extra precautions by extending his own self-confinement. Then summer holidays arrived. They both went away at different times, and all of a sudden it was September. Although 6 months had passed, not a day had gone by without some form of communication between the two of them. Over 180 days, 250,000 minutes, and 15 million seconds. And now to get to this moment where they were just separated by a pane of glass and Pierre's towering wall of fear. Couldn't he just muster up enough courage to step inside that bar? He glanced anxiously up the Rue de Belleville, the district's main street, and apparently where Edith Piaf was born, at number 72, a myth she enjoyed propagating. Legends aside, the working-class area hadn't changed all that much since the famous songstress had got her start singing in the hilly streets of northeastern Paris. Pierre's gaze was temporarily locked on the sloping street, buzzing with people going home from work or going out for their evening plans. Among the throngs, a face pulled him out of his hypnotic state. Yikes! Was that Rose? The last person Pierre wanted to run into was his gossipy colleague, or else the whole office would know about his date before he could even put his 50 centimes in the coffee machine on Monday morning. The mortifying thought was enough motivation for Pierre to hightail it inside Au Folies on the double. Salut, Kim? He asked, breathlessly standing next to the table she was sitting at. Pierre, bonsoir. Enchanté. So nice to meet you, she said, enthusiastically hopping up to greet him. The force of her movement and the weight of her jacket and purse propelled her chair backwards, tumbling in a gigantic clatter across the bar's classic tiled floor. Oh la la, I'm so clumsy, she declared, turning a brighter shade of red than Pierre had just been under the fluorescent sign of Au Folies. Pierre gentlemanly crouched down to pick up her chair and held it out for her to sit down. At the same time, Kim leaned towards Pierre to give him la bise, the French cheek kiss, the whole reason for her jumping up in the first place. He immediately recoiled. Oh, right, we're not supposed to be beezing right now, she said, realizing why Pierre was being so standoffish. What an idiot, thought Kim. First I arrive early, then I go and do a huge social faux pas. Deep breath. No worries, all of this is taking some getting used to, he said, sitting down opposite the lovely blonde. Did you find the place all right? She asked in an attempt to diffuse her embarrassment. Oh yes, no problem, he said. But it's true, I don't cross the Seine much, except when it's for a good cause. I'm honored, Kim said, her cheeks flushing once again. I hope I can tempt you over to the right bank more often. I've been getting to know my new neighborhood, and there are plenty of cool places I'd love to show you. Street art, hip hangouts, art studios, that sort of thing. Great, Pierre replied, not entirely mirroring her eagerness. He hadn't exactly jumped for joy when he'd read Kim's ecstatic message announcing that she'd finally found a new place in Belleville. He'd grown up and still lived in the 15th arrondissement. It was where his parents' creperie was, one which had been in the family for 3 generations. Indeed, it and they were exemplary of this sort of family-oriented, tranquil and tidy district. It was the polar opposite to Belleville, and not just geographically speaking. Artsy, cosmopolitan, and admittedly on the somewhat grungy side, Belleville had slowly been gentrifying. Nevertheless, it managed to retain its edgy vibe. Pierre was willing to travel across the city, to put his preconceived notions aside, for a good cause. Kim. Qu'est-ce que je vous sers? Asked the waiter, newly arrived at their table. What would you like, Kim? Pierre asked, even though he knew her French was next to perfect. I'll have a glass of rosé, since the weather is so nice. Good idea. Let's revive the summer apéro we weren't able to have. Allez, 2 verres de rosé, s'il vous plaît. The waiter slinked off to fetch their order, leaving the tender-hearted duo alone. Wow, it's hard to believe you're really here, said Kim. In the flesh and blood. Yes, after all this time, where to start? In fact, they'd already covered so much via their messaging. She knew that as a kid, he'd hated spending his summer holidays at his great aunt's home in Brittany, but now he went every chance he could. He knew she'd grown up near Bath, yet had never been inside the city's famous baths. She knew that he didn't like camembert, sacrilege. He knew she didn't like Marmite, understandable. Sometimes they would chat for hours. Other times they simply exchanged a cute emoji or goofy meme. It didn't matter what the message was about. This daily contact had helped them get through those trying times. Now, meeting face to face, after all these months, they were tongue-tied. So how was your day? Kim asked, taking the plunge into their murky conversational waters. Fine, it's a little strange being back at the office, but it's nice to see my colleagues, or at least some of them. Agreed. Maybe even the difficult ones aren't as bad as we previously thought. Yes, perhaps, he said, not entirely convinced seeing Gossipy Rose was a good thing inside and especially outside the office. Et voila, announced the waiter as he placed 2 frosty glasses on their table before floating off to deliver the remaining contents of his tray to nearby tables. Santé, cheered Pierre, raising his glass. Yes, santé. To our health, echoed Kim, clinking her glass lightly against Pierre's. They each took a sip of their rosé. Perhaps the cool liquid would activate their vocal cords. As they set their glasses down on the table, their hands brushed so everly slightly. Pierre uncontrollably went to reach out for Kim's long, elegant fingers, which he so longed to touch. Cacahuète? Pierre rapidly retracted his hand as if he'd been caught with his fingers in his great-aunt's candy dish. He looked up to find an elderly African man. On his head was a knit kufi cap, and in his hands was a squat, topless cardboard box, like an old-fashioned cigarette tray, loaded with home-prepared plastic baggies of unshelled peanuts. Actually, I came straight here from work, and I'm famished, said Kim. C'est combien? How much? €1, replied the entrepreneurial retiree. Kim rummaged through her purse and exchanged a €1 coin for a packet of peanuts. Content with his sale, the man shuffled off to tout his homespun wares to the next table. I hope you don't mind, said Kim, as she tore into the bag. Do you like peanuts? They're all right, said Pierre trepidatiously. Here, I unshelled some for you, she sweetly offered in her outstretched hand. Pierre stared at her irresistible fingers, now filled with potentially lethal contents. He wasn't so sure he should eat her generous token, but he didn't want to seem impolite. Don't worry, I washed my hands as soon as I arrived, Kim added, mistaking his concern for hygiene rather than the substance she was offering. Come on, Pierre, don't be nuts. You'll be fine, he thought to himself. Admittedly, he wasn't officially allergic to peanuts, but he hadn't tempted fate since he was a kid. And these last months he'd played things all too safely in every aspect of his life. He was surprised Kim had waited around. And she might not for long, especially if he carried on with this behavior. He caved. He accepted her kind gesture and popped a peanut in his mouth. So, how was your trip back home? He asked, taking a sip of rosé to wash down the bits of nut. It was really nice to see my family after so long, she said. England isn't that far, but with the travel ban, then the reduced number of trains, it was complicated. I can imagine, he replied nervously, munching away on the remaining peanuts. Did you have a nice holiday? Well, it rained a lot, and we were stuck inside for days, the last place we wanted to be. But it was great to be back in Brittany, he answered before taking a big chug of wine. Is it me, or is it getting hot in here? He thought. Pierre, are you all right? Asked Kim, brow furrowed with concern. I'm not sure. Your face is all splotchy, she commented in the nicest way possible. And I think you're sweating. Maybe it's from the peanuts. I have allergies, or rather intolerances, he confessed, picking up the menu to fan his face. Do you need to go to the hospital? Shall I call an ambulance? No, he managed to spit out despite his tightening throat. I think I just need some air. Of course, she agreed, pulling out a 10 euro note from her wallet, much more than was needed to cover the cost of 2 drinks in this unpretentious bar. She placed it under her half-finished glass of rosé, jumped out of her seat, which fortunately didn't go crashing down this time and draw attention to their hasty departure. Come on, let's go. Exiting the bar via its side door, they found themselves in a long, dimly lit alley. Pierre took some deep breaths. Then he remembered his puffer, his savior. How could I have screwed this up so royally? Thought Kim frantically. I've been dying to meet Pierre, then I go and almost kill him. I'm a total disaster. Maybe it's too soon to date again. Forget self-isolation. I should head straight to a convent and lock myself up forever. Just as Pierre's breathing seemed to be returning to a normal rhythm, an enormous cloud of cigarette smoke wafted into the alley from the bar's terrace. Come on, let's move down the street, suggested Kim, pulling at his sleeve. The terrace was packed, evidence that some things had finally returned to normal, or at least these seemingly footloose and fancy-free Friday revelers thought so. Soon Kim and Pierre were out of harm's way and all alone midway down the dark lane. Oh, phew, you seem to be doing better, Pierre. Yes, thank you. I really did just need some fresh air. You had me worried. I wasn't sure if I was going to have to give you mouth to mouth, Kim added flirtatiously. I wouldn't have objected to that, he replied with a sly grin, finally letting down his guard. She still had his sleeve, which he used as leverage to move in closer to her. The motion caused Kim to fall gently back against the building they were standing next to. Being here with you is magic, Pierre whispered. He leaned in even closer and put his hand up against the wall to support himself. Uh-oh, that doesn't feel right, thought Pierre. Was the wall wet? Doesn't it smell a little funny right here? Asked Kim. Hey, wait, I'm stuck. Pierre stepped back, removing his hand from the wall. He held it up to the lamplight to find his palm smudged in a rainbow of pink, green, yellow, and purple. Fresh paint. Oh my God, that's right, exclaimed Kim, peeling her hair from the wall. This road is chock full of street art. I think we may have just added our own touch to a freshly made work of art. Sure enough, as he looked closer, Pierre could make out the colorful walls, thick with paint and graffiti tags. Behind Kim was the image of a couple, locked in an intense embrace underneath the caption, L'amour pour tout vaincre. Love conquers all. Pierre wasn't so sure about that. Tonight's attempts at love didn't seem to be conquering anything but his feeble state of health and dismal level of confidence. I'd always thought about dyeing my hair, but blue wasn't the color I'd had in mind, chuckled Kim, taking the incident in stride. Her positive outlook was contagious, and Pierre couldn't help but laugh too, which rapidly spiraled into a fit of coughs. Kim shot him a renewed look of panic. I'm fine, he said, regaining control of his breathing. Laughter is the best medicine, right? That's true, but we still have to deal with this paint, she said. I think there's a fountain nearby where we can get washed up. The quiet side streets of Belleville might otherwise have been the perfect setting for a romantic stroll hand in hand. The paint mishap had thwarted this. However, it didn't stop them from gravitating closer and closer to one another. Ah, drat, the fountain is actually up a little further, she said, once they'd reached the end of the lane. You don't mind, do you? No, that's fine, said Pierre before realizing that the direction she was referring to was up. Oh, do we really need to trek up the Belleville hill? Weren't there other places where we could get washed up? Pierre grumbled in his head. Things are getting back on track. Don't mess it up again with your respiratory problems and anxiety. Just let her do the talking as you climb this fluffy mountain, and you'll be fine. Lucky for Pierre, Kim's nerves had loosened, and she launched into a detailed description of her weekend plans, so he didn't have to say much. Besides trying to save his breath, literally speaking, he was lapping up her sparkling optimism. She was beaming. She always seemed to be beaming, looking on the bright side, forging ahead into the unknown. This energy was exactly what he needed right now, tonight, and in life. But could he relinquish his fears and embrace it? And just like that, before he knew it, they were virtually at the top of the hill. But Kim led him down a small street to the right, which was, much to Pierre's and his lungs' pleasure, flat. Ah, there it is, said Kim, pointing ahead. Sure enough, she'd located the promised water source. It was a Wallace fountain, the lovely historic ones adorned in elegant ladies, another enchanting British transplant to Paris. Pierre scrubbed his hands under the stream of water while Kim tried to depunk her hair. Never mind, it should come out tomorrow when I wash my hair, she said. Another illustration of her idealistic outlook. You're beautiful just the way you are, Pierre dared. Although his hand was mostly clean, he was still nervous to reach out to her. You're pretty cute yourself, Kim returned bashfully. Come over here. I have something I want to show you, she added, tugging at his sleeve once again. Ahead of them was a little plaza, fringed by a few bar terraces on the one side and a large opening on the other. Close your eyes, she ordered coyly. All right. Pierre wasn't one for surprises, but he obeyed. He said he was learning to trust her and trust his own instincts, mind over matter. She guided him a dozen or so paces forward, then swung him around 45 degrees to the right. Okay, open your eyes. Ahead of him was a vast panorama of sparkling lights. The heights of the Parc de Belleville offered one of the most spectacular views of the city, a twinkling utopia as far as the eye could see. In the center was the Eiffel Tower, rising high as its queen, its goddess, its beacon. So close, yet so far away. But did Pierre need to look so far ahead? All he needed was right there in that present moment. It's a stunning sight, he said, turning to Kim. But you're all the sparkle I need. He raised his tie-dyed hand to Kim's cheek and leant down to place a delicate kiss on her lips, the kiss he'd been yearning for 6 months. Kim moved in closer, bridging the gap between them and eternity. Pierre went to run his fingers through her hair, but only got so far. He was stuck. The paint. They giggled. Everything was going to be all right. One step forward at a time. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this week's story on Quirky Belleville, a little bit of a quirky story, and a little bit of fun romantic optimism to end things off. Next week we are covering a very popular district, but with a twist. We are going to Montmartre. So look out for some magic and some adventure in our next story. In the meantime, stay safe, stay happy, and there will always be Paris here waiting for you next week.